All right, so what I'm talking about today kind of builds upon some of the things that were talked about yesterday, and of course the sessions earlier today, what Shannon said in terms of augmentation. I mean, I'm as excited about automation as anyone, but I think I'm leaning a little bit more on the augmentation part because it's about what we can use AI to do to make us better. And it is definitely not just automating the mundane. You can also use it for high-level strategic work. Some interesting information from General Assembly shows that there's a lot of people that are, of course, using AI in work, specifically with HR, and that's probably not a surprise. But what I like to call out is that the majority of people have not received comprehensive training. And what I'm saying, this ties into change management as well, because it's a technology, it is a tool, but if you don't receive appropriate training and change management, the tool is not going to do the work for you. Most people get very basic online conceptual training. A lot of people have to kind of figure it out on their own, and that is not the right way to deploy anything. Next slide, please, Dan. Scroll down. All right. So if we all know that AI upskilling is critical, or at least I hope people do, right? Where is the failure coming at? I think it comes down to maybe the false assumption that, well, we've rolled it out and it's a tool and generative AI accepts natural language input, right? So it should be easy. Everybody should be able to figure out how to use it. Um, Online training, it checks the box. It's the most scalable thing that you can do in a company. But as I like to say, online training transfers knowledge, but it doesn't impart upon you skills. Skills are learned by doing. So online training is not the vector to be able to help people get up to speed with maximizing the use of any Gen AI powered tool. So there's also a lot of talk around prompt engineering. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I really think it should be called now. And trust me, in the very beginning, I was on the prompt engineering bandwagon with everybody else. And with all the work that I do in this space daily, it's a journey that everyone is on, and my feelings and my approaches and my mindset are changing, and I'm trying to share that with as many people as possible. The reality is a lot of people may now, with prompt engineering, know a little bit better how to talk to AI, but not really how to work with it. And obviously, we know that hope is not a strategy. Next slide. So yes, we started with prompt engineering, and anybody who follows this space now, the next thing that everyone's talking about is context engineering. And I kind of agree with that, because if you're trying to accomplish anything with a generative AI powered solution, you have to provide it with the context necessary for it to be able to do a good job for you. But, if you go from prompt engineering and then we call it context engineering, I think it's kind of funny. It's kind of like just shuffling words around, and I don't know if it really helps everybody to keep changing the terminology. You obviously have to understand how to communicate with AI, but I, I really honestly believe that the challenge isn't the interface, and the challenge isn't really writing prompts. It's really the approach and the interaction. And this is what, after Mark had said some kind words about me yesterday, it really made me reflect on, why am I so passionate and interested in being able to try to break things down to help people understand things in a different way? And it's just me, as I learn things, I try to pass those learnings on to others as my mindset and my understanding of things shifts. And all things begin with the mindset. Let's just be honest. If you're not thinking right about something, you're probably never going to come up with the best solution. If I go back to my sourcing geek days, for me, it was like, let's first understand what it is that we're actually trying to do, or how do I get somebody to respond to an outreach message? Well, first you ask the right questions. Why would someone who is not looking for a job and is okay and is not responding to other recruiters, why would they respond to me? Why would they even take time to talk to me? Those are the types of, like, I don't know, first order thinking things that we have to jump into. Next slide. Thanks, Dan. So a few things that I wanted to share with you. Man, I feel like I can't read everyone's posts. I'm so busy that I can't read all of LinkedIn all day. And there's so many thought leaders out there. Ethan Malik is certainly one of them. I'm so glad that I happened to stumble across it in my feed when he was basically posting, hey, everybody wants to know what AI skills are. And he said, maybe there's an element of prompt engineering, but he said he really thought that AI skills, in air quotes, are really management skills, right? So what are management skills? It's first understanding what problem are we trying to solve and then deconstructing the problem. And some people don't really think about the fact that maybe you do this unconsciously, and we'll get to why it becomes more difficult with AI for most people. But it was so interesting. I put this little image over here on the right that does have a QR code that will take you to this article. This came out in 2023, not long after ChatGPT got into the world's hands. And when I read it, I'll be honest, it was interesting to me and I saved it, but it didn't fully make 100% sense to me. But when you read the article, the person is basically saying it's not about prompt engineering, it's about problem deconstruction. And again, I'm admitting that in the beginning, I'm like, this is interesting, but I'm not really sure how this fits in my worldview of how to work with AI. Totally fits today within management skills, right? So first you have to understand what we're trying to do. Then you have to break it down. Then you have to figure out what resources do you have at your disposal. In this case, it might be an AI-powered resource. Then you have to figure out what tasks can you delegate to that AI. Then you have to be clear in your communication around giving proper instructions and context so that you can get the best possible outcome and output. And then you have to provide evaluation and feedback. How good is the work? How can it be better? This process is really the process of management. That's what you would do if you had a new hire today and you wanted to give them a task. You would have to do these things, right? So how many people in the world do you think have been trained in these types of skills? Probably a small amount. Next slide. So hopefully everybody's read Microsoft's Work Lab, fantastic research and article that came out a few months ago. Again, QR code there if you want to go check it out if you haven't. And one of the big things of it from a theme perspective was every employee is going to become an agent boss, right? And I'll be honest with you, the first thing that clicked with me was, okay, so if everyone's going to be an AI boss or an agent boss, the majority of the world are individual contributors. How many individual contributors have had to manage anything other than themselves? Why would we expect people to automatically be excellent managers of AI and agents if they have no skills or experience in that area? To me, that was one of those, moments in my mind, right? And now for companies that are deploying any kind of tool, whether it's Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, or any agent like Hire Easy, right? You're going to be managing this agent. You're going to be directing it, right? And then helping improve it. You're actually performance managing it, if you think about it. And then when you really start thinking about it further, it gets even more interesting. Now you were previously an individual contributor, many people, and now you're managing something, and it's actually smarter than you in many cases from a verbal reasoning perspective. It has more a knowledge base and a synthesis of a knowledge base that's bigger than any human can really comprehend. It learns quickly and instantly, and it can work 24/7, right, without a coffee break, right? But then you line that all up with the fact that most people have never managed anything. Next slide. So from individual contributor to agent boss, that's a pretty big chasm for people to jump. And this is the framing that I'm just trying to provide to people and realize this is really what we're solving here. It's, yes, prompting is important, and I'm not saying it's not. I'm simply saying that I think we have to go before the concept of prompt engineering and understand this is really the challenge that you're facing, right? It's not just doing the work, it's delegating, it's managing the work, it's collaborating with a solution. You can't just throw in a ChatGPT license or Hire Easy agent license to someone and expect them to just jump over this chasm alone. Okay, next slide. So let's be honest. One of the things that I still think is mind-blowing, it's that when it comes to human, computer interaction, which is an actual area of study, by the way, HCI, it's like how we interact with computers. One of the biggest barriers that has always existed has literally just gone away. It's evaporated. We can now just talk to it using normal language, whether we're typing or using voice. And so, and I think it was mentioned yesterday, you have software engineering and computing 3.0. Yeah, programming language, if you will, is your natural language. So that's gone away, right? And it has more capability than the average person. I think now that the bottleneck is not the technology, it's actually us. And we have to figure out, how do we make sure that we are not the bottleneck, that we are not the constraint? How do we shift our mindset from being the doer and the expert to working with something that is the doer and the expert. Both, you can collaborate and you can delegate. That's one of the magical things. You can manage it, but you can also collaborate with it. And it's no different than if your company just said, hey, we just hired you a person that's going to sit with you all day, and they actually know a lot more about a lot of things than you, and they're actually really smart when it comes to verbal reasoning, and they actually can mimic empathy as well as you, or better than you. It's like, you would hopefully be excited, but then you're like, well, how do I manage this resource? Next slide. So I think that we have to have I think it's somewhat of a fundamental mind shift to move from just using AI to managing it. And if you think of AI or an agent as a brilliant new employee that's assigned to you, you're not just going to give them tasks. You're going to, well, first, it begins with your mindset. You need to treat them like a subject matter expert because they actually are in many domains. You have to provide super clear context, goals, and constraints, just like if you had a new human resource and you wanted them to do something. AI is actually really amazing out of the box. And even with relatively basic prompts, they can actually do some pretty impressive things, but you're not getting the most out of it until you treat it like a resource that you're managing and you're explaining everything that they need to do to be able to produce a good result. You can use them to collaborate on strategy. So how many times have you heard it when they say, oh, we're going to use AI to automate the mundane, repetitive tasks so that you, the human, can focus more on strategic things? Well, guess what? It's not an either or, it's an and. You can use AI for the most strategic things. And in fact, that's where I geek out mostly daily, is using it for highly strategic things as a thought partner. So, and you also have to provide feedback, right? Because it doesn't know if it's done a good job for you, just like a person. So if you're managing a resource and you tell them what to do and you show them some examples of what good looks like, and then they do it and they come back, you look at it, you evaluate it critically, and then you say, hey, this is good, but can you do a little bit more here? It's an iterative, ongoing conversation. And you can also challenge their output. You don't always trust, but verify. So my goal here in this slide is, why would you treat a hyper-intelligent AI any differently than a person who was assigned to work with you on a daily basis? Next slide. So we have to move away from just hoping that people are going to figure things out. You can't just give people tools and say, here we go. And again, I can understand why to some extent people might even unconsciously assume that people will figure it out because the barrier is gone. You can just talk to it. But when we're talking about the biggest workforce transformation of our time, the AI transformation of work, this approach is not going to work. You're going to get some incremental gains, but you're not going to get those transformative gains that I believe all people and organizations want. You're going to have to literally look at the roles, reinvent the workflows. I think this was talked a little bit about yesterday. Reinvent and reimagine the work with being very thoughtful around augmentatively using AI, where people and AI work together, as well as where agents can perform some automated work. Next slide. So just let's keep in mind, a lot of the world is individual contributors, and now we're unaccidental managers is something that I've kind of coined it as the phrase. Maybe there's a better one. If you're going to try to say, okay, if I want to, maybe I buy into this view that AI skills is really kind of like management skills. So what are those? Well, when you're working with your AI tools and your agents, just make sure that you're very clear about what is the exact problem that you're trying to solve. And if there's one thing I want to stick with you from my talk today is, don't start with AI, start with the work. You have to deconstruct the problem, break it down to individual tasks, figure out which tasks the AI can do either with you in an augmented way, like collaboratively or delegated, or totally automated by AI. And don't just limit yourself to the repetitive, mundane tasks. You can do that with really high order strategic tasks as well. And use it as a collaborative thought partner, as a sounding board. I use it every day as a second opinion. And sometimes I use more than one model for a third and a fourth opinion, because 3 AI brains are better than 1 AI brain, just like one brain, 5 brains is better than 1 human. And practice that delegation loop, right? It's not just here's a task, do it. It's give some instructions, let it execute, evaluate the output, provide some feedback, and iterate. By the way, for people that are familiar with some of my sourcing methodologies, that's the exact same thing. It's kind of like an agile loop. Next slide. And we're kind of rounding things out. I just want to drive this home. I am not hating on online learning. I think it is a absolute must. You just have to realize and recognize the limitations of it. Just remember, Online learning transfers knowledge to most people, but we need people to build skills, and that's being able to do it consistently under pressure. So I just want to point out a funny analogy. You're probably not going to learn how to swim safely and effectively from watching a video or drive a motorcycle from watching a video, right? You're not going to learn how to manage AI from watching a video, right? We need to forge these skills in the fire experience. Next slide. Thanks again, Dan. So experiential learning is something that I jumped on very early. And I said, we need to roll out video online training, absolutely. And you can try to embed some exercises in it. But what we've done specifically is make it real by having workshops. And some of you, I'm sure, have done the same thing. But if you haven't, or you haven't done enough of them, you need more hands-on workshops with relevant use cases where people roll up their sleeves and they get multiple reps in with those relevant use cases. You can do the hackathons as well, so more than just like an hour or two. You can work together as a team to collaboratively problem solve, and it be more in the mentality of working with AI as if it is a colleague. And you can kind of have AI peer review and role-playing scenarios. Man, I know some of you are probably doing some role-playing with AI. It's still something I think is underutilized. It continues to blow me away in terms of how effective working with these from a role-playing scenario is in terms of like difficult conversations or, initial calls with passive talent. It's something where you can definitely hone your skills through experience. Next slide. So how do you build an AI first or maybe an AI forward culture? You could say maybe you want to still be, of course, human first, but you still want to be leaning in on AI because it is the new way of working. And if you're not leveraging it, you're going to definitely be left behind. Remember that training is an event, right? It can happen once or twice, but we need to change the culture. And to do that, you need your leaders to model the way. I actually would like to call out CEOs. I've been on some calls with companies. I won't name the names or even the industry. I'll just say some of them have been and actually I will say that it was not in the tech industry, that a CEO said, this is the new way of working. Everybody has to get on board. And you also have to integrate AI into routines. You have to say in your one-on-ones, in your weekly meetings, hold people accountable. How do we use AI this week? What did you do this week? Share your best practices with others. Make sure it's a standing item so that you're actually holding people accountable. So it's not just, we did an online training, we did a workshop. It has to become a part of the culture. And you also have to redefine performance. I would argue that it should be a core competency that you're evaluating in your people in terms of how are you effectively using AI to collaborate and delegate. Next slide. So you don't want to fall asleep at the wheel. Some of you are probably familiar with that study. It was very interesting where people were using AI models for matching, and it was an HR use case. And when people were told that the algorithm was very strong, they basically stopped being critical thinkers and they kind of just started, trusting the AI. And that is like falling asleep at the wheel. So you want to make sure that you're not cognitive offloading. You don't want to get lazy. You're not letting it do the work. Again, it's more collaborative and also being a manager. A manager isn't being lazy by delegating work. They're reviewing the work, they're inspecting the work, and they're also performing that performance management. This is some of that shift in the responsibilities that we have today. Next slide. So another thing that we have to think about, I want to be a little bit forward thinking as well, not just today. A lot of what I'm talking about is today, but today and tomorrow, you're going to be doing orchestration. You're going to be managing AI managers. So it's not just going to be a co-pilot or an assistant. It's actually going to be about agents and maybe even multi-agent setups. And there are some platforms out there that already have that in our space. It's one thing to manage one resource. Now you have to figure out, how do I manage multiple resources? And let's remember that this is a really good framing. And this is, I geek out over this stuff because I think about it 24/7, right? So if you've got a challenge of an individual contributor that now has to be a manager of a resource, have we solved people management? Is that a solved problem? I would say no. The reality is people have been managing people for thousands of years, and there's all kinds of management science, there's all kinds of training. The reality is just because you have a lot of training and a lot of experience, it actually doesn't make you a good manager. So I don't think this challenge of being good at managing AI, it will never be a solved problem where we can say, check, everyone in the world is magically the world's best AI manager, just like we can't say now, everyone in the world is a great people manager, because it's not true, because it's actually people skills in our brains that we're we're using to be good managers, right? So just wanted to get you to think about that. Next slide. So it is really a new way of thinking. I don't think this is a technological shift. That's already here. The shift is actually a psychological one for us. It's not, our value isn't always now tied to us as an individual contributor doing things. It's now by thinking and directing. And the one domain that I think is wholly unique to people still, at some point AI may be curious, but as far as we know, it's not curious. It doesn't sit around and wonder about things and ask questions first, right? We end up prompting it. So that is a domain that's really important for humans right now. And a lot of it begins with those first questions, being curious, like I mentioned before. Why would somebody respond to me if they're not looking for a job? It's me exploring the answers to that that leads me to new ways to get those types of people to respond. It's the same thing when you're working with AI. And you also have to have humility and realize that you may not be the smartest one in the room, and AI is as dumb as it's going to be today. It's only going to get smarter. So we have to get used to managing resources that are actually in many ways more capable than us. But that's a good thing, because if you, I think it was Ross Perot, kind of dates me, but and there might also have been Jack Welch and G's. You want to surround yourself with people smarter than yourself. Well, we're going to have AI and agents that are actually smarter than you. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You don't want to be the smartest entity on the team. Okay. Next slide. Rolling out practical steps. So what can you do? Okay, develop online training or take online training, but that's not enough. You need to do experiential learning. So that's a huge takeaway. And it can't be just a one-time event. It would be nice if you also work with leaders as learners, because you should lead the way. People in your company need to lead the way from a leadership perspective. And you need to change conversations around team meetings and one-on-ones to make it a constant topic of conversation to drive accountability for people to build skills in this area of managing AI. Next slide. So key takeaways. I agree with Ethan Malik and others, by the way, that the real AI skill is actually management. And again, I'm not saying prompt engineering doesn't have its place. It does. But I'm saying that's not enough. I think you go to the higher order thinking of, I'm managing this as a resource in the same way that I manage a person. And if you think of it as a person and you approach it from that management perspective, I will guarantee you it will change the way you interact, and it will change the quality of the interactions and the output. Guaranteed. The big challenge we all face is turning individual contributors into agent or AI bosses. Experiential learning is the only way to do that. You have to be systematic and prescriptive in terms of redesigning your work in the age of AI. And this is a culture change. It is a tech rollout, but very similar to what was mentioned by Shannon, it's change, and it's a culture change, because you have to have your mindset right first before you can actually then work with the technology and get 80 to 100% of the potential ROI from the solution. And I think that rolls me out. There you go.